Hello, hello, and welcome back to another interview here on Voice of the Rings. I am your host and guide here, Zolan Ironshield, and today we have an amazing guest with us, Mr. Matt Elliott, also known as Scenario, which a lot of you probably know from Lord of the Rings channel here on YouTube as well. He is the senior world designer for the Lord of the Rings online MMO. And for those who don't know what that is, just to give a little taste, most of you know who are watching this, but the Lord of the Rings Online is a massive multiplayer online world set in Middle-earth in Tolkien's world. It has hundreds of thousands of active players and millions of subscribers to the game over time. It's a pleasure and honor to have him on the channel today and talk about the lore and world building of the Lord of the Rings Online MMO in Middle-earth, and we're also going to be talking about the new Legacy of Morgoth expansion, which you can see right down there below us. Yes, it's very, very exciting. I'm really excited about it. So again, so glad to have you on, Scenario. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you for having me on here. Doing pretty well. We're in the final throes of getting the expansion pack wrapped up. So it's a lot of like minutia right now, but we're excited to talk about it. We're excited to get it out there. We just had our first Bull preview open up this week, so people are finally getting a taste of what we've been working on for the
That's
last year or
so
so now.
cool. Yes, and I've seen some of your walkthroughs pre in
Yep.
development. Excellent. They're super fun to watch. But again, we're going to be talking about so much cool lore stuff today on the channel. It's going to be super fun here. And again, if you guys enjoyed this, leave comments. We could always talk about it later in the future. And like and subscribe if you would. And also, I highly recommend you guys all check out a link in the description, the LOTRO main page to pre-order the game, or if you're watching this later, get it when it's out. And then also don't forget to also check the Lord of the Rings YouTube channel, which I also link down there, which you can see Scenario when he does stuff on there in Court of the Ring and stuff. So fantastic. All right, so Matt, we're gonna go with going for some rapid fire questions. So I do this with everyone who comes on the channel for fun. It's basically just you as an individual with your love of what you like about Tolkien and the world of Middle Earth. So we'll just go through it real quick, a few minutes for fun. And the first question is, how were you first introduced to Tolkien's world? Was it through the books, movies, a video game, or from a person you know or family member?
So it was really back when I was in like elementary school. We would always go, the town library was right across the street from our elementary school. So we'd always like once a week walk across the street as a class, go pick out books. And I do really remember picking out The Hobbit and having that be kind of an evening reading with my family, with my parents. So that's where I would say like my first introduction to it was. And in terms of all of the different books that are part of the Tolkien experience, The Hobbit is really the most appropriate for a kid of my age at that time to pick up and read. It
Yeah,
was written as a children's story with some revisions over time to kind of make it work with everything. But at its core, it's a kid's story, and it's kind of the softball introduction
yeah,
to that greater expanded universe. So I
the
think
deep dive.
that's that's really where I was first introduced to it. After that, I discovered the Rankin Bass animated films. I was big into animation. Disney was huge for me. Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel, like all of those, like put me in front of a cartoon. I loved it. That's what I went to college for, was animation as well. So the Rankin Bass stuff was just really interesting and exciting, and further just kind of introduced me to other aspects of the franchise that I had never seen before. And then when I started college, the movies were starting to come out, and that was really kind of a great way for me
Mm-hmm.
to like get to know my roommates better, because we were just like, let's go see this movie. And so that was that kind of like first some of the first like shared college experiences with roommates and
That's
whatnot, was going to see
that's
those movies.
that's a great answer. Yeah, that's so cool. I'm also, The Hobbit really got me into the story.
Yeah.
My mom and really read The Hobbit to me, and that was really like huge for me. And then it was just like, and then I was hooked. Then I saw Peter Jackson's movies because they came out when I was real tiny, and then I watched them a few years, not in theaters, unfortunately, but I got to see them though when they came out
Yeah.
released. So
They
awesome.
they bring them back out into theaters every couple of years, so
You you
or local theaters run it.
you know they're good when they come back every time. They keep bringing
Yeah.
them back into theaters. All right. So then the second question for you. This is a fun rapid fire one here. what are your top favorite 3 Tolkien characters? This can include the expanded universe, like even characters that you guys have created in LOTRO.
So that's really hard
It's
for me
a
to answer
large
because
one.
there's lots of characters that I at least relate in part to, like Frodo and Bilbo. You can relate to those
Mm-hmm.
characters where you're just like, I just want to be cozy at home. Why are you dragging me out to go do these things? Like this, I feel like Bilbo was kind of like the introvert that was just dragged out of his house screaming by his
Yeah.
friends, and so
Yeah.
I think that's really like I connect with that. That's like appealing to me, where it's just like, no, I just want to cook yummy food and not go out, but my friends all want me to go out, so I guess
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing.
Uh, yes.
And then as I get older, there are definitely aspects of other characters that you kind of see in one way when you're younger reading it, but then you have like a deeper appreciation for kind of the weight that those characters had on them. Like
Mm-hmm.
characters like Aragorn and whatnot, where it's like when you're younger, you just see like, oh, he's this cool action dude.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the fighter.
And
Yeah.
then but then as you get older, you see someone like him who's just like, well, yeah, but he's got a lot more richness to him than just someone who's going out and fighting the fight. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's carrying all of this history with him. I mean,
Got weight
honestly,
on his
like
shoulders.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he's like the a lot of Tolkien has like a lot of male characters that
Mm-hmm.
don't have that kind of toxicity that a lot of modern culture has in it now. And so it's easy to look at those characters and think of them as role models. Like Aragorn
Mm-hmm.
is definitely someone that can fall into that. And then Samwise, I always that scene going up Mount Doom, like that's always a hard scene to
Oh,
watch because
gets shivers. You're like, yeah.
you're just like
Yeah.
this this is the kind of friend that you should
Mm-hmm.
aspire to be to
Yep.
help lift up the people around you when they're down.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, those are really, really good ones. So, yeah, I know it's really a hard question. That's why I tried to give it to like 3 of your favorites. So, do you think those are probably some of your favorites? It'd be like Sam and Aragorn and
Yeah, I would say those
Frodo and
three. I
Bilbo.
mean,
Yeah.
I almost went in the like I'm going to talk about my favorite places in the world because the world is a character, but that
Yes.
felt like it was a little bit of a cop out of an answer.
Well, don't worry, because actually, that's the next one I got for you here. So basically, the next one are what are your top 3 favorite locations in ARDA or Middle Earth? And
So
especially you as a world designer, I feel like this really is big for you.
yeah, so I've having had my fingers in pretty much everything at this point except for Gondor.
Hmm.
I was not working at Turbine at the time that Gondor was being made. Um, I've touched a little bit of everything. I think the Shire is probably the single most endearing space that you can think of.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's for me, I have a lot of resonance with kind of heavily forested mountainous areas. So being able to explore places, like the Vales of Anduin and whatnot,
It's one of my favorite
just like
spots.
puts me in such a happy space. Like it
Mm-hmm.
is, if I could step outside and be in a region like that, I would be happy. That would be it for
That's
me.
your
I would be
dream
like, I
home
could live here. I
location.
could live here.
Yeah.
Who cares if there's wargs? No big deal. I'll just set the pine forest on fire. No.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
Um,
good answer. So you really like so you really like the forested areas of Middle Earth. That's what you're
yeah.
like. And then of course the Shire. You guys, just as a side note from me as a longtime player, and obviously I know I'm now a content creator, but that aside, as a longtime player of the game, loving Lord of the Rings Online so much, and one thing that really always stood out to me since I was a small child, because I started playing when I was like, wasn't even in high school yet. I was really small. And I remember the biggest thing, it just like, you guys just love the world, whoever made this game, right? Because for one, I could
Mhm.
feel the same, it felt like this perfect reflection of the books, right? And what Tolkien wrote and what he was trying to get in when I imagined the story. And that I'd come into your guys' world, into LOTRO, and be like, oh my gosh, this is what I it's like seeing
Yeah.
it happen fold out in front of me. Where it comes to storytelling, or the locations and the worlds and how you guys fit these little things in, and you go to a little corner of the middle of nowhere, and there's like this thing you guys did, and it's like, what? They take the time to do this, you know what I mean? Things like that. I always love finding things like that. And then like and even music and stuff and everything. I had Chance Thomas on. It was really cool to hear how you guys all work together as this big team on Lord of the Rings Online to just bring it to life. Anyway, it means a lot. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like the benefit of at least the majority of the game we've built being so heavily written about by Tolkien means that it's really easy for us. Air quotes easy. I say that writing
Yeah,
a check for one of my colleagues, Chris
we'll take that
Pearson,
with
who
a
does
grain of
all of the
salt.
research. But like
Yeah.
it there's no shortage of detail for us to look at, and I think it's really important for us to pay attention to those details so that when a player who is very, very steeped in the stories and the literature goes to those locations and they stumble across a thing that they didn't expect to find there, but know is supposed to be there, is like it really just adds meaning to the world that you're
Yeah.
playing in and makes it feel like a representation of the space in a way that a lot of games don't necessarily have the effort into. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's this is great explanation. Here, let's ask the next one now. So your favorite areas, wooded areas, the Shire. Great answers. So number 4, what race would you be in Middle Earth if you were in the world? If we put you in that another reality, right? What would you want to be of the 4
I
main
mean,
races?
I would probably lean either Hobbit or Beorning.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Um, and a lot of that is just the association that those folks have with
What they like
the
to
world around
do.
them.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Okay. Great answer. Great answer.
Like
Um
hobbits, they want to just have their own little slice of space and live a very rustic life, and Bjornings are very similar on that front. And like again, it all comes, like, we're all products of where we come from,
oh yeah.
and like for me, a lot of where I grew up is tied to nature and growing up in those settings, growing up in, helping out friends who, had a farm and they needed help getting the cows brought, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's something that I grew up with. So seeing those kinds of characters in the world, and generally that's a Shire kind of character for the most part, even though it exists in other regions. I feel like
Very similar.
hobbits are kind of that like idealized version of that rustic lifestyle.
Yeah. You're just out there, cutting down, making a farm, making a having a wood log cabin, that kind of thing. Absolutely, yeah. I know. I totally relate to that. I did a lot of stuff helping a pack station up in the Sierra Nevadas growing up with friends who had some up there, and it was just such a pleasure to be up in the mountains and work with the horses and just like be out there next to the rivers, and it meant
Hmm.
so much. And I'm someone that kind of grew up near the beach, which I also love the beach. So the new Corsairs area for me was really exciting because I loved seeing
There's
that.
plenty of sand coming up for you, so
It's lots of sand. Exactly. We'll get into that in a minute here. What is your favorite adaptation or Lord of the Rings film movie? You can do like even 2 answers if you want to pick your favorite 2.
yeah. I mean the movies themselves are probably so do you mean like which individual one or just like the
Uh,
series that?
individual. So like if you want to use Peter Jackson's trilogies, like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, you
Yeah.
could pick one and one, or whatever, something like that. Or you could pick
Yeah, I mean,
the animated films or something.
I think the Rankin Bass adaptation of The Hobbit is like that's where my brain goes to. It was, you know, one of the first times I'd seen something that I'd read turned into a film,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
so that just like locks in with me. And the
Yeah.
music, like it's hard to go wrong with the Goblin Town theme songs in there. Like
Yeah.
when we built Goblin Town in Lotro, one of the things that we kind of like required of our sound department was we need to have Down Down to Goblin Town homage as part of the
Yes.
music for this area that we're building.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that's I think where I go to when I think about like formative Lord of the Ring adaptation.
Got it. Got
The
it. Got
movies are
it.
great. I love them,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's
So
it's that old Rankin Bass animation, and also being an
the first.
animation nerd, like that's where I go.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's a great answer. Fantastic answer. And then follow up one. Do you have a favorite scene in those animated ones? Then
I
you can
know
even
The
hop to
Hobbit.
the movies if you want. But
I know The Hobbit is a very diversive series of movies, but the Goblin Town minecart adventure is there's
yeah.
just something like cheesy fun about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really, it knows it's not taking itself all that seriously, and it's just kind of having fun with it. Did The Hobbit need three movies? Probably not, but
yeah.
hey, at least there was some room for fun
It
in
was
there
still fun.
beyond,
Yeah. Yeah.
because Lord of the
I'm
Rings is so serious.
I tell my viewers all the time, I'm the guy that I really like the Hobbit trilogy. And I was kind of the guy that I was like, yeah, I understand there's a couple things in there here and there, like the love triangle and things, whatever. But the big one for me was I'd rather have more than less, right? So I'm glad that there's more because then they just pick out the one or two things you don't care about and enjoy the rest of it. Of course, I'm again huge fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy,
And
Hobbit trilogy,
and
and
the
the original
behind the
animated.
scenes stuff with Benedict Cumberbatch in the green suit with all the like golf balls all over him.
Yes,
That
it's
is just pure hysterics.
and
Like
his
he's getting so into playing Smaug,
oh
but it's just like how do you take him seriously when he's just crawling
I
around on the
know.
ground in a green
Yeah.
suit?
Oh my gosh, man! I those are people I hold those people up for someone who does the voiceovers now and learning and getting better and better. I'm like these guys are just they're so good. Maybe someday I'll be slightly close. Who knows? But anyway, let's go to the next question here. What's your favorite Tolkien book of all the works? Could even be the ones that
I mean,
Christopher Tolkien finished and put out. If you
it still comes back to The Hobbit, and
yeah,
especially as a
good
dad
answer.
now. I'm there are a few like pieces of literature that I'm looking forward to, when my daughter gets a little bit older, to reading with her, and The Hobbit is like right smack dab in the middle of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I the Silmarillion, there's some great stories in there, but it is a dense read, so you really have to
So
be in a certain kind of
yeah.
mindset in order to like dig into that.
Yes.
Baron Luthien is just kind of like it is almost like Grimm's fairy tale in how it's presented, which is
Mm-hmm.
also like interesting and different because you're so used to these war stories, and now
Yeah.
here's this kind of like almost gothic fantasy
Yeah.
thing going on here.
Yeah. That's a great answer though. Like the Hobbit one, total fantastic answer because that's kind of where I lean to. Like I love all the Lord of the Rings trilogy and I really love listening to history, but the Hobbit book is just I don't know. I just always come back to it. Like I think it's
It's
because there's
cozy.
dwarves. It's cozy. There's hobbits and dwarves, and they're like my favorite. And I love the elves and I love the humans, right? Equally, right? But it's like I just relate to the hobbits, like you're saying. I just so much. So, great answer. Do you have like a similar favorite? Is it? I know I kind of asked this for the movie, but do you have a favorite chapter in the books in The Hobbit?
I have not read the books in a while, so I would be hard pressed to tell you a specific chapter.
Maybe it would be like the one with the whole Goblin Town scenario and Riddle in the Dark kind of thing or something. That's the one I really like with the Bilbo part and Gollum.
Yeah, or just the opening chapters.
Yeah. Oh, in a
Those
hole in the
just
ground.
set the
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
The that alone, that's what starts it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get on the road, and ever
Absolutely.
on does it go.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't keep your feet, you never know where you might get swept off to. All right.
Exactly.
Exactly. What is the most important thing you think you've learned from Tolkien's works? Just something that maybe you took to heart. It could be real quick.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of my adult experience, adult life experience with Tolkien has been working with it professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that's been really just great has been documentation. Like Tolkien loved documentation, and the appendices, as well as just the details that he wrote about in the core chapters, the detail in them and how he's documented everything just makes finding the information you want about the setting super accessible. And I
Yeah.
think I think that's one of the, while there may be, Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, those may be dense and dark subject matters at times.
Mm-hmm.
The detail is there that if you needed to talk about something, write about something, create a world in
Yes.
that setting, Tolkien wrote that,
He
and
wrote
it's
it.
there for us
Yeah.
to take the information out of that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great answer. And we're gonna go into that deeper with the world building in just a second. And then I think you already gave me this, but my last rapid fire question was: do you have a life memory of something you wanted to share that related to Tolkien that you really enjoyed, but you kind of said it at the beginning already?
Yeah,
So we
it's
could,
the having the memory of like walking across the street to the library
yeah,
and
yeah.
pulling the book off the shelf. Like that's the
That's
first experience I had with it, and it's I didn't know then that I would be working on what I'm working on now,
it's
but
funny how
like
that works, isn't
it
it?
sticks.
Yeah, yeah. That is so true. I get that feeling sometimes. Like I've always been such a big fan of Lord of the Rings stuff, but I never thought I would start doing a full time channel. I'm like, I get that feeling. Yeah, it's just crazy.
The world works in weird ways.
Yeah. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about you. We could just go into whatever you'd like, but I have a couple things we can look at, and it's basically I want to hear about some stuff with you as the senior world designer of Lord of the Rings. Like we know your history of kind of how you got into Lord of the Rings stuff, but like for one, we'd love to know more of how you get into being. How did you get to the point you are with? You said something about being in Turbine before, which some people might know. Turbine
Yeah,
was then turned into Standing Stones Games that now runs Lord of the Rings Online, but
ish.
sort of different
Yeah,
management. You can tell us the details if you want to, but
yeah. So I can just do like a brief history lesson on
yeah,
my career path.
yeah,
So I was the art kid in high school, always in the art
mm-hmm.
room. Thought I would be a comic book artist. When I graduated, that was like what I was aiming towards. And then this wonderful thing called Photoshop landed in my lap. And so I switched into more digital arts and whatnot. Went to school for animation and
Mm-hmm.
what is now called user experience design, but it didn't really have that label
Mm.
when I was going to school.
Kind of formed
While
over
I was in
time.
school, I fell in love with a game called Asheron's Call, which was produced by a company called Turbine in the Boston
Okay.
area. And at that point, I kind of made it my mission after graduating college to work at Turbine.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
so I went to a couple conventions, talked with some people. They had an internship open for a production artist, so I went and applied for that. And then got a call the day before Christmas telling me that they expected me to be there January 7th to start my internship.
Merry
So,
Christmas.
and so I started working at Turbine as a production artist
Okay.
for what would become LOTRO, but was called Middle Earth Online at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so I was a production artist there. For some reason, people still want to use the garbage props that I made 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
They're like the shield, the hide shields that goblins run around in, or you go to a town and there's an old well. A bunch of some of the like stuff in like Skorgrim's tomb was all stuff that
Mm.
I made. I'm like, why are you people still using this stuff? It's a hot mess. Do
Yeah.
better.
You're like, yeah,
um,
you're your own worst critic. I know that feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, After that, I moved over to a project to working on Asheron's Call as the art director and lead artist on that project for a while.
Okay.
Came back to working on Lotro as lead world designer and was lead world designer all the way up through the launch of Riders of Rohan.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
af- After Riders of Rohan, I went to work on various R&D projects at Turbine, one of which would eventually become Infinite Crisis.
Oh, okay.
Um, then, unfortunately, as this industry is wont to do, I was hit with a round of layoffs
Mm-hmm.
and moved into working in project management for several years. And then when SSG started getting formed,
Yeah.
the members of the Turbine team that were going over and
You
becoming
guys moved over
SSG
there. Okay.
reached out and was like, "Hey, we're getting the band back together. Do you want to rejoin the band?" And I was like, "Great, this beats project management."
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. That's
Um,
a great little
and yeah,
positive
and
story.
I've been working back on LOTRO ever since. My first SSG update was Where Dragons Dwell, where I
Oh,
did all
okay.
of the like instances and whatnot
Oh, very
for
cool.
that update.
That's really awesome. Yeah, you answered a couple of my other questions too. Have you worked on other things besides Lotro? You already said it. So we'll
Right.
just you've done. We'll go past that one. What is your favorite thing about working on Lotro? And I'll expand that. Uh, you can kind of see whatever you want, but one question I have too is like your favorite thing personally, and like what is the main thing you work on with doing world design? Do you do like a lot of planning with it? Do you do a lot of actual art with the like on the system, like doing textures or whatever? That's just kind of curious.
So
That's a huge question, I know, but I'll let you break it
yeah,
down.
so the world design department is um, mostly a design department. We
Mm-hmm.
have an inclination towards art, but we're not normally creating the art assets ourselves. Or
Okay.
when we do, the other artists kind of glower at us and tell us to stop doing that,
They're like, that's what we're doing.
because they're like, "You're making more things that we have to remake." Uh,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
Now they're usually good sports about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so usually, like for me, you know, I've kind of put myself in a position where I'm doing a lot of the big picture implementation. So
Mm.
our world team, we have Chris Pearson, who's our kind of lore master for the product. He's the one that does all of our like in-depth planning and whatnot. So he's the one that cranks out a 80 to 150 page document every update with all
Whew.
of the research that he can find, and
Oh
then
my
anything
gosh.
that we need to kind of whole cloth create to fill in the gaps that we have in available literature. The further away we
Yeah.
get from the core lands
Mm-hmm.
of the setting, the bigger that document has to get because
Yeah. You
there's
guys have to
less
build on
stuff
things.
for us to lean on. Like where we're hitting Umbar basically put us into lesser documented territories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, um, so he'll do that. He'll do planning maps and whatnot, and then I end up being the like big picture landscape implementation. I
Okay.
have pipeline and tools that I use to do the broad strokes like terrain for
Mm.
whatever we're producing. And then from there,
Is that
then our
like
world team, we kind of look at what we've built and then divvy it up amongst ourselves. Like, oh, I want to build this area. I want to take this area.
got
And
it?
then we go through and do any fine detail terrain sculpting we have to do, terrain texturing, scene file placement, getting all our trees and rocks in place, putting in landscape spawns for
Mm-hmm.
monsters to fight, building monster camps, other associated world system things like resource nodes. We build
Yeah.
the towns and populate the towns. Um, we do the instances and dungeons as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Which
We
is
don't do
a
the
massive
gameplay in the
job in
instances and
itself.
dungeons, but
Yeah.
we basically uh, when I have to explain to older family members what I do, I usually say I'm like a landscaper. I don't grow the
Mm-hmm.
trees. I don't make the sod, but I do take all of those things and make the pretty landscape.
Got it.
Um,
So do you kind of like then like when you said broad stroke, you kind of like you'll decide like okay, there's going to be rivers here. These are going to be mountain areas. This is going to be a
yep,
valley, like things like that, and then you guys like break that apart as smaller
yep.
jobs. As so okay, okay, got it. And then same thing with like the instances. You kind of set up how they're like laid out, kind of thing, like maybe visually
So in
or
instances, so building the landscape, the world team is usually the first people on the ground,
okay.
because our content designers, our quest designers can't really place their quests if they don't have something to place
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah.
So we're usually the first ones on the ground when it comes to landscape stuff. For
Okay.
instances in dungeons, those are often led by the content designer and quest designer who is in charge of that space. So
Hmm.
they'll provide us with a rough like map of like how they want the hallways to go, where they want major encounter rooms to whatnot to be, and the dimensions for those spaces for their encounters. And then they
Hmm.
just kind of like, here you go, here's our map, and then off we go to make the map look appropriate for the setting.
Yeah, and then you have to think about all the things, and we you've already answered other ones of my questions I had, like what does it go in world building? Well, we just talked about all that, so that's awesome. So and then when you get into new areas,
Mhm.
like so you're like new settings and new areas. This is one question I was always wanted to ask: is that how do you feel like when you're like, okay, so this is going to be, you think about the biomes, right, and how they change or whatever in locations. Like one fun thing I know about the new one, which I think is good, we could say, is the Legacy of Morgoth, is the sandstorm effect, right? That's a new thing
Yep.
that you guys are going to implement. I don't know if you want to talk about, is there challenges to implementing brand new systems like that on the engine? And I have one follow up question to
Yeah.
that when you're done.
So with the figuring out what a space looks like, what's going into there, like
Mm-hmm.
we have such a volume of existing assets. So we usually always start by just saying like, okay, what do we have already that we can use to build a space? Okay,
Yeah.
we got this chunk of stuff. Then we go, okay, well, what new stuff would we need? What
Mm-hmm.
new kinds of new trees, grasses, terrain textures, those sorts of things, in order to really give an area its own unique character.
Do you guys do the creatures
Um,
too?
Beg your pardon?
Just do you do the creatures too? Like the textures for the.
Yeah, we do. We have we call it monster planning, where we
Got it. Got
sit
it.
down with
Okay.
our content team and with our art team and talk about what creatures we want to have in a region, what camps we want to have, and then if any of those need new art,
Hmm.
that's when like the art team comes in and says, okay, we've got it, so we can kind of use this creature as the base for it,
Hmm.
and then we can make the new. So we try to be as collaborative as we can. Work from home makes it a little bit more challenging because you can't
Yeah.
just get up and walk over to someone's desk.
Yeah.
But I think we've got a good pipeline for figuring all of that stuff out
Yeah.
too.
It's really, you guys do a really good job. I love the new scorpions. I saw some of the pictures, like the new textures on those creatures and the different, like,
Mhm.
bugs and stuff. They're really, really cool. And also, I've noticed in the past of you, when you guys update a new area, that you'll sometimes go back and update creatures in older areas, like with texture wise, right? And how they
Yeah.
look. And I'm always like the first one, like on my streams, we're like walking through somewhere. I'm like, look at this, guys. Look, the squirrel. It's got a new texture on it, right? And my viewers are all, like, yeah, you're right, and laughing at me. But I love those little details that you guys will fix or like, update. I should say they're not broken, but update to newer
Yeah.
graphical looks. You know what I mean?
It
And
it
I,
throws people off sometimes too.
because they're used
Like
to an
they're
older
not
look.
expecting
Yeah,
something that they're used to seeing every day suddenly change. And it's not necessarily a change for the bad. It's just
yeah, yeah.
change and it's different. And because of that, it's surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it though. I just love, one thing that I always joke about too is the water quality in Lord of the Rings Online. I think is at a level that is insanely good. Compared considering being an older engine, you guys do such an amazing job with the graphics still in the game, and I just love the art style of the game in general. But the water, I always joke, and you'll hear my subscribers will make fun of me in a nice way because I'm always like, look at that water. Because I remember what the water looked like pre
Oh yeah.
DirectX 10 and 11, and when I played when I was a little kid. And now I look at it and I'm like, this water looks better than some games coming out today, right? That that are like good graphics. I say in quotations because not all of them are. But
Hey, what
yeah,
water? I'm happy to talk about water.
I
it's,
I would
it's
love to
got a
hear more about
history.
water. Go for it. I would love to. You know what? Let's just give it a minute. Go ahead. Talk about the water
Yeah.
history. I'd love to hear that.
So originally, our water was very static. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you remember where it was just like the same kind of like scrolling texture. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, to make rivers, we had to make a for every direction we wanted the water to look like it was flowing, we had to make a unique material that was telling the texture to scroll this way and scroll that way.
So
And
that's why you get
then
those like, oh, I okay, I know what you're saying. Okay, from looking at
yeah,
it.
so it's like that this river can only ever flow east. It will,
Yeah.
no matter how you plop down that water
Yeah.
type is only ever going east.
Okay.
And that worked ish, and the water still looked decent, but it wasn't ideal.
Yeah.
And then we did some work to start incorporating DX9, DX10, DX11 features,
Yeah.
and you get the like dynamic water ripple when your character is running through the water. We got the water flow material, so that we can. I mean, we literally have what is equivalent to a marker in our tools that we can use to be like, and this and this and this, to
Yeah,
like
give it
sculpt the course of the water through
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
And then with the Corsairs of Umbar, we did additional work on the water to try to, when we aren't using water flow, not make it just like flat glass, so
Yeah.
that the water does have some texture and refraction to it when the dynamic water isn't necessarily moving, and also to make it look like, you know, out in the oceans anyways, that there is some movement, even though it's technically not moving. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of the like things with game design is like, where can we make just optical illusion tricks
Yes.
to imply a certain look
And it keeps
without
us
actually having to
engaged.
do the like, you know, the Assassin's Creed like waves while you're on a ship kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's like important, right? Because you're trying to make sure it's optimized for people's systems, but at the same time you don't want people to be like jerked out of the, you know, the immersion, right? So
Yeah.
like that's, you guys do a really good job of that. I yeah. Even like the new currents in Umbar, like around the ocean, of course, then the waves. I love that you guys added the wave effect in the ocean.
Those are all hand placed.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was like 4 days of my time going through and
Oh
hand
my
placing waves
gosh.
around all the islands.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate it. So if anyone appreciates it, Zoll and Iron Shield here on Voice of the Rings does. Because
one,
I was like pointing that out every second when I first started Umbar when it came out. I was like, look at the waves. This is so cool. Yeah.
one of our engineers a little while ago, like when he was looking at the stuff we were doing for Corsairs of Umbar and the stuff that we were starting to do um, for Legacy of Morgoth, he goes, "It's like you guys are Matisse, but you only have access to crayons."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You guys are like so good at it. You're like, it's like, how do you keep making this look better? It's very impressive.
I mean, it's one of the challenges with a game this old, you know, a game that has been around as long as Lord of the Rings is finding ways to make it feel not exactly modern, but
Yeah.
like feel like it's not too far behind,
Yeah, yeah.
given the
Fresher.
constraints that we're
Yeah.
working within. And that's like finding, you know, picking and choosing, like, oh, well, we could implement this sort of thing. Like, one of the things that is my favorite new feature that one of our tech artists figured out how to do for us is it's world scalar texture mapping. So, like before, if you say you have a rock and you want the rock to be really, really big, normally you just scale it up. But if you scale it up, then the texture also scales up. So when you get up close to it, it's nice and blurry, and you don't like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So he figured out a way to like basically lock the scaling on the texture, so we can arbitrarily scale some things, and the texture
Oh,
itself will just stay at the same resolution. So
that's cool.
it'll dynamically tile based off of the scale. And
So,
that's been like for us building landscapes, that is a huge thing for us because it lets us take these rocks that, you know, we use to like add geometry and texture to like cliff faces and whatnot, and arbitrarily scale them to however we need to scale them, and they still look good.
That's why, is that why the mountain regions look so good in the new Umbar area and like some of the newer Gondor ones with like the big rocks on the side? I'm sure you've probably redone some
Yeah.
texture kinds, but they look so good. Like that was the first thing I noticed when I came into like Anfalas and Gondor. I was like, whoa, look at the distance, guys. Look at the mountains over there. Like it doesn't just kind of look like a blurred mesh. It's like I can see detail on the mountains. That's pretty cool.
It's probably those rocks that we've jammed in there.
It looks great. Well, here's a great the follow-up question. You kind of brought it up already, but I was curious. Does obviously you already talked about the limitations, which it was a question we already answered. What about when it comes to new technology? Is that really been helping with the older engine? Because something I hear a lot from, this is not the majority of the community, but people be like, oh, it's, it's older, you're not gonna be able to improve it because it's an older engine. And I always tell people, well, that's silly, because anytime you get new technology, you can increase an older technology and make it look better, right? That's just how technology works. So I'm curious, so like you said one thing, you're does that newer technology help sometimes to make this newer system, DirectX 10, 11, all that kind of stuff, for water or mountains?
Yeah, I mean, adding new technology and features into like the graphics engine and whatnot is always a tricky proposition, because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
still have an engine that's kind of built with the expectation that the hardware that's running it is from the mid 2000s, right? Um, and to some degree, we still want to support those people that have
An older
the
system.
machines that are not as beefy, that aren't as modern, because that's, maybe that's the only system they have and that's all they can play on. So we still want to be able to support that. But that said, there are aspects of that technology that do kind of lock us into not being able to do certain things. Like,
Yeah,
I think we talk a lot internally about like still supporting DX9.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there are aspects of our engine that are reliant on components of DX9. And so
yeah.
we first have to like do the work to untease all that code out and re-implement something new that would that supports one of the modern versions of DirectX before we can get rid of the old
Yeah,
support.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like
absolutely.
there's that challenge of it, and that's a
That's
slow process, because we
time
only have so
consuming.
many engineers, and that kind of work is somewhat specialized to
Well,
begin with.
on a positive note, you guys have done a great job with the new server updates, like the legendary servers with the new server
Yes.
banks. That is, I didn't think I would really know. So you guys have done a lot in the last few years to reduce lag, and I've noticed as a player, right? And I have good internet, good computer. I haven't really had a whole lot of lag at all in the last like 6 years of the game, right? It kind of
Mhm.
dropped off for me a long time ago, but I know other people still were struggling and things. But when you guys did the legendary servers and I first got on, I was like, I don't think I'll feel any difference. I did feel little minute, millisecond differences on response time, and it felt like even like loading distances would load really quick. I wouldn't see trees appearing, in the distance. They'd just be there,
Yeah.
things like that. And I was like, wow, I can really feel the difference with, I'd have 40, 50 people around me and there wouldn't be any stuttering or lag, right, from like information or things like that. So, great job on that. But how has that been
Thank
going
you.
with
It's
this?
that sort of thing is definitely a like long game, right?
Of
Like
course. Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
been wanting 64-bit servers for such a long time, and it's just, again, it's like teasing that old technology out and plugging in new stuff in order to make it work. And that's really kind of where the 64-bit technology, the 64-bit servers, the client, like those were necessary things, but they
Yeah.
took time. And I know a lot of players were impatient, but we're like at the beginning of seeing the benefits of all of those years of hard
Of
work that our
work.
engineers have been going through, that our artists, that our designers have been going through to try to optimize things. Like,
That's
you
exciting.
know,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
and the Angmar and Mordor, those are just the start, right? Like
Yep.
those servers are, they've been great. They've been successful. They've like gotten a lot of attention, and we're not planning to stop there.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want to extend 64-bit servers to other play environments. It's just going
Yes.
to take time. And part of the reason why Angmar and Mordor are the first two to do it is because we really need data, right? Like we need more data. The Ring Wraith event
You got to test it.
is as much fun as it is for players. It's also a data collection event for us,
Yeah.
because it lets us see how the server is performing, where new hiccups might
Little
be. Like
bottleneck somewhere or
we
something. Yeah. Yeah.
right, like each time we fix something, then might reveal other things that we need to fix, and
It's
that's the process we're going through. Like we very recently, we found a source of lag for us was, the way the pathing system interacted with physics of rocks that were buried underneath the ground. And some of the rocks we were using had very complex physics, but not a lot of it was walkable physics. But monsters were still like, oh, hey, I need all of this information about this thing that's underneath me. And so that led us to be like, oh, well, let's simplify the physics on these rocks to help improve things. So like when we first built the game, we were very focused on client performance. We had the launch of the game. We were like, okay, we have to hit 30 frames a second on this sort of hardware, and this is and then what our metrics are. And then after that, we didn't really think about performance from other avenues, because we were basically told you got to hit this frame rate for the client, and that's what we focused on. And so now we're kind of looking at, okay, well, what other things are related to performance? How does physics relate to performance? How does asset count in an area relate to performance? How does pathing complexity relate to performance? How does player population relate to performance? And building the tools for us to analyze the data from all of those points and then adjust how we're implementing things based off of that.
So it's like data, manpower, money, time, all of that matters in going into like advancing this, which is absolutely something. And as a positive side note too, I always tell people this. I'm always impressed how Lord of the Rings Online has kept the same subscription based has such an amazing free-to-play system, but also your subscription base is the same price as when it came out. That always means a lot that you guys still do it like that. And that's why a lot of times when I always say, if we want to support the game, guys, get the supporter packs you guys get put out. Put the stuff in the cosmetic things or the convenience things on the LOTRO store. Because one thing I just have to compliment with your guys' game is you guys really do think about the players as a player, a longtime player, because I can see where you guys don't go into this it's not all about money, right? You're trying to build this world. You want to support the world. You have to make money, but you also care about the players. I can see the balance that you guys work so hard to achieve on that. So personally, as longtime players, so I just want to say thank you to all you guys for working so hard on that, because that's a really hard line to follow, with this industry.
I can take zero credit for that. But...
Yeah. Well, whoever does that in the group, bonus points to them.
To kind of dovetail into that, I think one of the things that it's interesting reading message boards, Reddit, Discords, and whatnot, and seeing different conversations that people are having, especially when it comes to what we offer, whether it's supporter packs, quest packs, expansion packs, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And the people there will be something that'll come out, and there will be this subset of people that are a little upset that their specific thing isn't catered towards in that update. And it's and you'll see posts every once in a while. It's like, well, why can't every update have less of that, something for everyone but less?
It's hard because there's always
then
someone
that makes for a less fulfilling experience for those things that we are building towards.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So I think we do I think we do a really good job of making sure the game has a lot of something for a lot of different kinds of players. And
I agree.
We're not always going to release updates that are up any individual player's alley. If we release an update that's for a festival but it doesn't have raid content, it kind of has to be okay that not every update hits every check mark.
Absolutely. For I mean, this is a good, if I could compare it to something like my channel, I cover a lot of different subjects on my channel. After I release a video, I always have one or two people who are like, I want you to make this kind of video. It's like, well, I will. Give me 2 days, right? You know what I'm saying? So I totally understand as a company what you guys deal with that. Yeah.
Well, there are people that would want me to just crank out housing neighborhood after housing neighborhood after housing neighborhood.
Yeah.
And while we could do that, you kind of need breaks. You need to not fatigue out players on too much of one thing.
Absolutely.
And taking the time to make sure that the different play styles we have in the game feel represented over the course of the year, not necessarily with every update, but over the course of the year, I think is important for us to do. That's why I'm always advocating and pushing for those lower level fill in the gap regions. because
Yes. Yeah.
there's a community for that. That's why I'll always push for housing neighborhoods, because there's a community for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to do those every update because it
You
just gets exhausting. That's
you
why
still
we
need the
don't do like
future
new
end game.
races, new classes every year, because like you
Yeah.
kind of have to let people kind of settle into the new stuff
Mm-hmm.
before hitting them with more new stuff.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's what I was actually answering one of my next questions. One of my questions was, what's the biggest encounter? Sorry, encounter. The biggest thing you've encountered to keep things fresh, fun, and engaging with, like, for example, the new region. If we talk about the Legacy of Morgoth, like, what have you guys really like focused on this one? If you can't give us spoilers, that's okay. But of the new
It's
stuff with
on
the Legacy of
Horror now,
Morgoth,
so
that's true.
there's
It's
some
out there.
stuff I'm not going to talk about
Yeah,
because Maid of
yeah,
Lions will actually show up on my front door to read me the riot act. But
yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, I think like depending on the update, what we do to keep things varied and interesting varies.
yeah.
For example, when we were doing Legacy of Durin, that storyline, we had this incredible volume of dwarf assets, but we didn't we because we're a small team and we have the budget that we have, we couldn't really be like brand new assets completely for
Mm-hmm.
Gundabad, like whole new dwarf set for Gundabad. We
Yeah.
kind of had to make the decision to be like, okay, well, how about we do new textures and then find new and interesting ways to use the things that we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It still
and so
felt
like
fresh too.
there's that approach for some areas. Places like heading to the Shield Isles and Umbar and now into the Valley of Ikrabon, we are in fairly untrodden territory where we haven't built deserts before. We haven't really done,
Mm-hmm.
Mediterranean before. We've done a little bit of Mediterranean with Gondor, but this
Yeah.
is, excuse me, this is like full on, like Mediterranean
You're
desert,
really going into that.
sand
So
and shore and sun and
yeah.
sandstorms. So it's like certain updates require more to keep that
Mm-hmm.
variety going for it than others.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And sometimes the familiarity of certain assets probably helps, right? Because
mhm,
like when I went in Gundabad, I felt that like, oh well, I still feel like this is dwarven because like there's some like certain building parts look like what I've seen before, but at the same time, it did feel fresh. It felt like a different city, right? Or the more
mhm.
ancient version of the dwarven cities or something. So I still thought it was really well
Well,
done.
we're always learning off of what we build. So
Mm-hmm.
like Gundabad is we had our time in Ered Luin figuring out the dwarves, and we had our time in Moria figuring out the dwarves, and then we had
Lonely Mountain.
the Erebor
Yeah.
time, and we had Ironfold and the Grey Mountains, and those were all kind of again, it's the long game, like all kind of building up towards like taking everything we've learned from all of those different implementations to be like, okay, now how do we evoke that kind of feel, but also make it feel different? Like
Mm-hmm.
where I think Moria, we were very consciously like trying to pull things in and make it more claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Gundabad, we were like, let's open it up. Like, let's have it feel like an open city as
Yeah.
opposed to tight tunnels, hallways, warrens, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. And the next one too, just to connect to what you were saying, is that I had one question. We were talking about now you're going to new assets, right, with the deserts
yeah.
and all this different things. What made you guys I don't know if this is directly something you exactly work on, but made you guys decide with the lore story to continue going like south in the story with Umbar and the Fourth Age and not do anything to the east yet with Rune? And would there maybe be a chance to see Rune in the future? I don't know if you can even say that or know that yet.
So several years ago, kind of at the midway point of Legacy of Durin, we were tasked by our project manager at the time to be like, give me 5 different pitches for storylines
Hmm.
that we can follow up with after this one. And so we kind of like took a few weeks and as a team like brainstormed, pulled up ideas, and ended up having several different pitches for directions we could take the game. One of them was the direction we're going now.
Hmm.
One of them was kind of going through Haradwaith. One of them was going back to Mordor, Rune, Grey Havens. Like we had all of these different storyline ideas.
Yes.
And then we sat down as a team and kind of were like, okay, we have all of these ideas. Which ones really like resonate and sing to us most? And I think we all kept kind of coming back to the idea of going to lands that were different from everywhere that we've been before. Like, we know how to build rolling hills. We know how to build deciduous forests. We know how to build river valleys, all of that. Going to Umbar meant, from a world building perspective, a whole new game, because they were environments that we've never built before. So it was a new and interesting challenge for the world team, but also narratively a new and interesting challenge because it was taking us to an area where the characters aren't the heroes anymore, right? Like, all the way up through
the main books. Yeah.
all the way up through to the Great Wedding. You're buddy with Aragorn, basically, right? Like, you are known to the heroes of Middle Earth. You're known to the movers and shakers. Everyone that you interact with clearly knows you're a good guy. As soon as you go to Umbar, that's not the case anymore. They may not hate
Who are you? Yeah.
But you're not this friendly presence to them anymore, to the characters that you're interacting with. And you're seeing a civilization kind of trying to figure out what its role in the world is going to be now that it's no longer oppressed by evil.
Yeah.
And that's not cozy. That's not comfortable. That's not something that we've seen several players express on like message boards, forums, discords, and whatnot, that like they don't feel like they're in Middle Earth anymore, because a lot of that concept of Middle Earth is very couched around Gondor. And Gondor being the good guys. And now we're in an area where it's like the people that you were like riding off to battle with, that you were your chums, your pals, all of the people around you don't think the same way about them as you. And
exactly.
It's a different narrative and uncomfortable challenge that I think we're doing a good job of like showing. Like, we showed the people in Umbar as this people that just kind of want to figure out how to be people in the world now that they're no longer oppressed by Sauron. And we're kind of continuing that story through to the other cultures that we're going to be running across in the Valley of Ichabod.
And I think you guys have done a really, really good job with that, because really you have gone like you obviously we're in the appendices kind of, right, of the storytelling, but you're almost like you're bouncing off that. Yeah, exactly. You're bouncing off kind of into like almost the unknown, right? Territory of like what ifs, right? Which I feel like you're still doing a good job of. I always say this on my channel, but there's like canon, which is Tolkien, right? Christopher Tolkien, like that's the stuff that you guys are so respectful of. But like I call the next thing legends, and that's what would be anything that would like fit in really well and make sense and not contradict the story. And I think you guys do an amazing job of that personally. I've really seen with the whole Umbar, and I'm really excited about the Legacy of Morgoth, because I've really been enjoying you guys kind of going into this more like the what if, like how would these people be acting, like you were just explaining, because it really is like, it's kind of fun to learn. And I kind of understand where people are like, well, it doesn't feel like Middle Earth. Well, it's because we're not really in like the normal part of Middle Earth. We're down in Harad, right? We're down this whole new area of people. And granted, I know we'll probably still get other stuff up in Middle Earth again in the future, but I really love what you guys have been working on. And I still feel like it feels Tolkien-ish to me, just because you guys are being respectful of the original lore. And that's a huge one in this day and age. There's a lot of stuff going around in the world with things where people are, different adaptations or whatever. But I really always tell people, like, I always come back to Lord of the Rings Online because it's like, it's my fun, relaxing place that I know you guys are going to, like, do your best to be really respectful to lore. And I think you guys really nail it almost all the time. So, so keep that up. And then one other question I wanted to just tap on is you made a comment about one of the directions was the Grey Havens. And would there ever be a chance that you guys might just make just the Grey Havens area, kind of like you did with like Forage back in the day, where you kind of just made one region to kind of have as a continuous, like another area? Because one I've always wanted to see the Grey Havens since I started the game, and there's always been that little spot in Aaron's Wood that says to the Grey Havens, right?
It's a place
So
that a lot of people want to see. It's what it represents is tricky though.
yeah,
Because like I
is
think
it the ending
this
of
is
the
something
game or
that
something? Yeah.
we as developers, and also I think the player base struggled a little bit with when we finally dropped the ring into Mount Doom, right? Like because for a lot of people
Where do we go?
that
Yeah.
is seen as the end, right? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that still happens both in the book and in the appendices afterwards, but like dropping that ring into Mount Doom is a very final like statement
Yeah, you beat
of
the bad
things.
guy, right? Like, who's the new
Yeah,
bad
like
guy? Yeah,
you
yeah,
you beat the bad guy. Roll credits.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
and so like the Grey Havens is narratively very similar, where it marks a endpoint
Yeah.
for a lot of characters. And
And
so
how
it's
do you?
really
Yeah.
hard to feel comfortable introducing that endpoint before the characters that aren't are even ready to go there yet.
It would be.
Where
It would be
we're at in
so
the
long.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just what that's going to mean for us as developers, what that's going to mean for the players, like once we start going there, because you go to the Grey Havens, and then you're going to be wanting to like tell
Go
the
to
stories
Valinor.
of Bilbo and Frodo,
Yeah.
and every all of them passing on to the West, and but that's not the right decision
It. No.
for us to make
Yeah.
with this game as it's still live and going on. So
And where it is
it is
timeline.
a very potentially evocative, visually evocative space,
Yeah.
but it has very serious narrative implications for us when we go there.
That makes so much sense because you also don't want to put it out and then to make it feel like, oh, well, is this the end of the game? Like
Yeah.
everyone's gonna leave? Are we gonna finish the game? It's like obviously no. It's an MMO. It grows. It continues. So I could
Right.
see why that could be kind of like a again like the ring moment. I feel like you guys did a good job after the ring was destroyed. Like where we went with the story, helping Arwen and Aragorn, and or Elisar now, right, King of Gondor. I think it was really good. It made it feel like, oh, there's some new enemies to deal with, right? That we need to help our friends with. So I think you guys did a
Or
really good
just
job.
lingering remaining enemies, right?
Or yeah, the leftovers, or in this
But
case, the
that's when you
legacy.
start getting into the this doesn't feel like Middle Earth anymore, because like
Yes.
what feels like Middle Earth to people? When you ask someone what feels like Middle Earth to you, like they'll probably talk up until the ring drop, and then after that it's kind of hazy.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Where
know,
in
like
reality,
we did Legacy of Durin, we're doing the Song of Waves and Wind, and those are both outside of the core canon of the game or of the stories. So it's on us to really make sure that we
yes.
sell the Tolkien flavor in those spaces that are outside of what's been written.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I really think the biggest thing that again, I'm not lecturing you guys, but it's just remembering that it's what makes sense at connected to the original lore, right? And being respectful to it.
Yeah.
And you guys do that. You do such an amazing job. So that's
It's why we have the relationship that we do with Middle Earth Enterprises, right? Like
yeah.
they have a lot of trust in us because we have this very long running history of really being as faithful as we possibly can. There are some things where we have to game it up because it's a
It's a
video game.
game. Yeah, exactly. You
But,
have to have fun
you
still.
know,
Yeah.
we try not to take liberties where you, we try not to take liberties with the material. We try to make things make sense and feel like they fit into things while also still telling our own stories. Like I still like one of my favorite stories in game that we've told, and honestly like a core memory for me as a game developer is the story of Sarah Oakhart and Amarthiel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
It's really
spoilers
good.
for anyone that may not have been playing this game for the last 17 years.
Yeah.
And the reveal that's associated with that. Like, I remember the day we patched that reveal onto the worlds, I was logged in on an admin character listening to the world chat and just seeing the text streams of reaction from people as they were doing the instance and getting that like that reveal. It's just such like that says to me that we did things right.
That's
You
a
know, like
that's a great feeling. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that story too. We won't go into it just in case there's that one new player who wants to go do the story. Go do it. But yeah. So and I guess we'll do one last fun question here. Is there any chance we might ever see a blue wizard, or is that something that's out of the rights of what you guys have to cover kind of thing?
I'm not sure what I can talk about.
Okay. Okay. Well, I won't push that then. Okay.
There are characters of certain colors that may appear in the story, and there may be new characters that are related to those characters.
Oh, so we might have some relationships there. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I appreciate the fun little sneak peek there. And then
And tomorrow, Maid of Lions is going to be kicking down my door.
well, we won't go into it any more than that. Well, we've really covered a whole lot here today. This was super fun. It's been so fun to have you on. There's one great comment that one of my Patreons gave me, and I agree with this. So I'm just going to read out here for you and for your team. Thank you for adapting the world of Middle-earth and expanding upon it in ways that are respectful to the source material while simultaneously giving gamers exciting things to see and do. So much of what you and your team have created is, to me and many, and I agree with this, so like what Tolkien himself might have invented in LOTRO stories, original stories and characters are like canon. So what he's saying is you guys have done such a great job with everything that it almost feels like some of the characters are canon. Like Sarah Oakenheart, like you just said. Like in her mind, in my mind, it's almost like ties into the original Lord of the Rings story now. Because like I've lived and breathed it playing this game since I grew up. And it's just really well tied into the original story because nothing ever there's no contradictions, right, to the original story. And you guys work really hard, I can tell, to make sure that never happens. And, you know, with locations, storytelling, everything, it's really amazing.
It's what we strive for, right? Like we have so much history with this game ourselves, and with the source material ourselves that, you know, it's important for us to make this world and make it feel like it is a world, right? Like that's why we have all of the map notes off to areas that we haven't built yet. It's to make everything feel like it's all part of a living experience. And you know, being able to create all of what we create and have people appreciate it in the way that your Patreon member and yourself have expressed, like that, like I said, that means we're doing it right. You know, like um my Discord status is like, when you do everything right, people won't be sure that you've done anything at all.
Yeah.
And that kind of like,
Yeah.
it's just like, you know, are we making our own stories? Are we telling our own stories? Are we adapting the source material, and it's just obscure source material that no one ever really knew about? Like,
Yeah.
when people aren't sure about that, when you look at other adaptations and you see people being like, oh, that's that character from the game, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, probably not, but it's cool that you think of it that way. Like, it shows that the life of the game has expanded beyond just the game itself, when it has an impact on people beyond just their playtime with the game. You know,
Yeah.
when it
If people are
inspires people to do things like what you do, or inspires, like, there's so many musicians that are on YouTube that play music in LOTRO. Like, when a game inspires
Weatherstock,
people,
right? I just covered that this year. Yeah.
Yeah, when it inspires people, that means that you're doing something special.
Yeah, when 300 people show up for a band on top of Weathertop in a MMO video game, yeah, you're inspiring people. That's pretty cool.
300 people and a white.
And, yes, and a white. Yes, exactly.
One white.
And
That's just happy to be there until he gets knocked over by 300 people.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So the Lord of the Rings online Legacy of Morgoth. Is there anything else you want to tell us about it real quick, or anything? I'll have a link down there for my people watching this later. If you want to pre-order it right now, if you watch this later, go and buy the expansion. Check it out. It's super cool.
Yep. Definitely pre-order and buy. We're
Yeah.
happy to have the support. Just thinking about Legacy of Morgoth, like I think it's we have been having a lot of fun building what we've been building over the last year. It's unfamiliar landscapes for us, so hopefully we're hitting the tone right for these like uncharted areas. Basically, we kind of have a few dots on the map that we know of, and we got to fill in everything in between. So hopefully we're nailing the look and feel of everything. Um, for those players that want, Bullroar is going to be active over the next few weeks, so they can jump in and check it out themselves. Or if they want more tours and previews, like you had mentioned at the start of this, I have my series of preview streams. I think this is going to be airing after the last one, but the final one is a tour of instances and whatnot,
Okay.
with probably potentially a special guest from one of our game systems designers as well. But yeah, we're heading towards the finish line on this and getting excited about what we're going to be building for next year.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much again, Scenario, for coming on. And I'll link that video if it comes out in between this and when I release. I'll link it down there for you guys to go check it out as well. But this was such a fun interview. You're always welcome to come back on, or anyone on your team. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings Online here on Voice of the Rings. And with that, if you have any last minute things to say, or I'll just end the video here.
If there's anything, I just want to thank everyone for supporting LOTRO, for supporting the community as well. The community is one of the best communities I think I've ever seen
Oh,
from gaming.
100%.
There are a lot of people that are happy and excited about Lord of the Rings Online, fantasy. There's just a lot of positivity around the product, and it's always awesome to see just people being happy. So
Absolutely.
everyone keep it up being happy.
Well said. And that's what we'll always do here on this channel and the LOTRO community. Yeah, I always say the LOTRO community is one of the most fun, accepting, enjoyable. Everyone's, no matter what your level of gameplay is, come and join us and play. We love that so much. I play on the server Crick Hollow, mainly my kinship, but that's one of our goals. We're trying to get to end game content. We've been doing some, but we just, anyone, no matter the level, can play with us. So it's really a great community. It's fantastic. And you guys have done a wonderful job there on Standing Stones. And again, thank you, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And to finish up, everyone have a great and wonderful day in Middle-earth. I'm your host and guide, Zolan Ironshield, as always. Baruch Kazad Kuzad Menu at your service and your families. And I will see you on the next episodes and streams of Voice of the Rings. Stay happy, my friends, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya.